Dear colleagues, we now continue and go to the second part of our opening session, which is consideration of supplementary items. Before we begin with the consideration of supplementary items, let me highlight a few practical and procedural points to bear in mind for the remainder of this annual session. A document explaining this in detail has been circulated in advance. With regards to elections, the deadline for nominations of Assembly officers is 9:30 on Tuesday, the 1st of July. Early voting for members who have an unavoidable obligation to leave the annual session before Thursday will take place from noon to 6 o'clock on Tuesday, 1st of July, and 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the 2nd of July. I remind you that members must request early voting in writing before 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, the 2nd of July. The elections for Assembly officers will be held on the morning of Thursday, the 3rd of July, between 8:30 and 10:30 a.m. I have appointed Karina Ödebrink from Sweden, Kyriakos Hadianni from Cyprus, and Mikita Poturayev from Ukraine as tellers. Thank you, Karina, Kyriakos, and Mikita for taking on this duty. I repeat, these points relate to the election of Assembly officers. To facilitate the process to elect committee officers, the general committees will be invited to set a nomination deadline of Tuesday, the 1st of July at 6 p.m. This will be confirmed by each general committee at their first meeting. These elections will take place during the last meeting of the general committee. With regards to the list of speakers, in line with Rule 27(2), members wishing to speak in debates should sign up no later than 1 hour before the announced time of the opening of the sitting. I stress this in particular for the debates in plenary on the 2nd and on the 3rd of July, for which we will have strict time constraints. Considering that this is our first plenary session and that you may not all be aware of this rule, I will open the speakers list for our 3 supplementary items on the agenda for the next 10 minutes. Let me also announce that our good friend John Whittingdale will be chairing the drafting committee in charge of preparing the Porto Declaration. Dear colleagues, we will now proceed with the consideration of the supplementary item on the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, Global Challenges for Peace and Security in the OSCE region, proposed by Vice President Mikita Poturayev. I will first give the floor to the author of the item. We will then have a general debate on the item proposed, after which we will consider the one amendment that has been proposed. I remind you to please have your yellow plenary voting cards available for any votes needed today during this meeting. I now give the floor to Vice President Poturayev to present this supplementary item. Dear Nikita, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. This one? Okay, this one. Thank you, Madam President, distinguished colleagues. Helsinki Final Act is a pretty young document, 5 years younger than me, in fact. And you know, the secret of the document is that we in Soviet Union were never going to respect it. We need it because we wanted our western border to be secured so that we could concentrate on aggressions on other flanks of the Soviet Union, for example, in Afghanistan. And of course, we were never going to respect human rights. And hundreds of Soviet people were imprisoned in Gulag fighting with Soviet authorities who signed Helsinki Final Act, fighting for human rights. So, colleagues, I hardly can imagine what could happen if countries, European countries and other countries which signed Helsinki Final Act would believe to Soviet Union and say in 1975, they promised to respect borders, they promised to respect human rights. Well, I had good Soviet perspectives in my time. Probably I could be political commissar here in Porto, supervising, for example, Porto City Committee of Communist Party. But thanks God, nobody believed Soviet Union. And civilized world understood that democratic countries should be strong and powerful. And that's why, finally, not through dialogue, but through strength and readiness to fight, Soviet Union collapsed. And this is how Helsinki Final Act started to work. And now, colleagues, unfortunately, despite all the statements about readiness for peace by leadership of so-called Russian Federation, which say that they are the same country as Soviet Union, they even still have the chair of Soviet Union in United Nations. So it's all the same. They continue to try to intimidate the Ukrainian people and break their will to resist. The latest massive attacks by Russian terrorists on all large cities of Ukraine and numerous smaller towns and villages have once again made the world horrified and see the real readiness of the Russian Federation to end its aggressive war and establish a comprehensive, just and sustainable peace. Dear colleagues, I would like to ask you to support the supplementary item 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, Global Challenges for Peace and Security in the OSCE region. The members of the Parliamentary Support Team for Ukraine have supported it. It contains strong messages to the international community in support of the Helsinki principles, and let me remind you the principles. Sovereign equality, respect for the rights inherent in sovereignty, refraining from the threat or use of force, inviolability of frontiers, territorial integrity of states, peaceful settlement of disputes, non-intervention in internal affairs, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, including the freedom of thought, conscience, religion or belief, equal rights and self-determination of people, cooperation between the countries, and fulfillment in good faith of obligations under international law. Of course, they in Moscow also remember about all these principles, but they are not going to respect them. So I call you to support this supplementary item, because we have to show them that for us it's not just words, that we, democratic and strong countries, we remember what these words mean in reality, and we are strong enough to defend this principle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poturayev. I will now open a debate on this supplementary item, and for the moment I have 6 names on the list. And the debate will be started by Ms. Ingrida Sirkene from Latvia, and she will be followed by Mr. Jaroslav Juršusnin from Ukraine. Ms. Sirkene, you have the floor.
50 years ago, our nations came together to adopt the Helsinki Final Act, a beacon of peace, dignity, and international cooperation. Today, as we mark this anniversary, we do so under a shadow. The most significant threat to peace and security in Europe in a generation. The Russian Federation's war of aggression against Ukraine is not only an attack on sovereign state, it's a direct assault on the very principles we committed to in 1975: sovereign equality, territorial integrity, non-use of force, human rights, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. Let me be clear, this war is a crime of aggression. It violates the United Nations Charter, international humanitarian law, and the principles of our OSCE. The illegal occupation of Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine, the manipulation of democratic institutions, the weaponization of food and energy, the spread of disinformation, and the forced deportation of children. These acts represent not only a geopolitical threat, but a moral failure if met with silence. We express our unwavering solidarity with Ukraine, its people, its defenders, and its children. We remember the victims and commit ourselves to justice and accountability. We call for the immediate withdrawal of all Russian forces, the return of all illegally detained civilians, and full respect for Ukraine's territorial integrity. Ukrainian President Zelensky has signed an agreement with the Council of Europe to establish a special international tribunal to try officials responsible for Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Every war criminal must know that justice will be served.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Mr. Yaroslav Yursushin, and he will be followed by Mrs. Judy White from Canada.
So, dear colleagues, I do ask you to vote for this supplementary item because when we're talking about principles, we're not talking about something not visible, not acting. We're talking about concrete action and concrete surname. For example, when we're talking about freedom of speech, we're talking about more than 100 journalists who were killed in Russia from the start of war in 2014, and the majority of them was killed after 2022 when full-scale aggression started. We're talking about 29 journalists, civilian journalists, not combatants, who don't take a weapon into arms, who now detained, who are hostages of Russian regime. But we're talking not only about Ukrainian journalists, because a lot of Bashkirs journalists, a lot of Tatar journalists, a lot of Chechen journalists even don't have possibility to be visible and audible for us, because Russia committed crimes not only against Ukraine, against Georgia, against Armenia, against Moldova, and I do believe that voting for these items help not only us, but all region be stable. As a founder of Helsinki resolution want to have. And yes, when we're talking about condition, and I do thanks speakers on the previous session that Ukraine have 3, but now we have 4 precondition, then peaceman agreement will be effective. And basic of them, it's a human first. All imprisoners, all children which was stolen, who were stolen, Russians from Ukraine must be returned to home, to families. these supplementary items about children, about raped women, and about hope that it not will be committed in the future. Thanks a lot, and vote for item.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mrs. Judy White from Canada, and she will be followed by Mr. Costel Duna from Romania. Mrs. White, the floor is yours.
Colleagues, I'm pleased to take the floor in support of this SI. I'd like to begin by thanking the Ukrainian delegation for your tireless advocacy on behalf of your country and for the immense courage that you and all the Ukrainian people have shown in the face of Russian aggression. This war was unprovoked and unjustified, and it's a flagrant violation of international law and Russia's commitments under the Helsinki Final Act. 3.5 years of full-scale war by Russia have given rise to an untold number of war crimes and human rights abuses against the Ukrainian people. As this SI underlines, among the most egregious crimes committed in Ukraine are those that have targeted children. The war has had a devastating impact on children, causing trauma and leaving scars, both physical and psychological, that will be felt for years to come. Thousands of Ukrainian children have been forcibly deported or transferred to Russia or Russian-occupied territory, where they have been subject to indoctrination and efforts to erase their language and national identity. Such practices constitute a grave violation of international law, including the Convention on the Rights of the Child. The international community must do everything in its power to support the safe return of Ukrainian children to their families and communities. This includes cooperating within the OSCE and the OSCPA to share information about missing Ukrainian children and to support local child protection and reintegration efforts. Colleagues, respect for human rights, sovereign equality, and territorial integrity are core pillars of the Helsinki Final Act, which Russia is obligated to uphold. As this SI calls for, participating states should continue to exercise pressure on Russia, including those economic and restrictive measures, until it abides by the OSCE commitments. At the same time, OSCE participating states should also contribute to efforts towards the establishment of a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Indeed, the OSCE has a long history of helping to bring an end to conflicts through dialogue and mediation. It should build on this proud tradition by assisting the parties to bring about a ceasefire and to end the war. As allies and partners of Ukraine, we must insist on Ukraine's right to self-determination. In this regard, and to my Ukrainian colleagues, I want you to know that you have an ally in Canada. The Canadian people and the Canadian Parliament stand by your side. I urge you, colleagues, to support this SI. Well, merci, thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Mr. Costel Dunava from Romania, and he will be followed by Ms. Irina Gerashenko from Ukraine. Mr. Dunava, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I want to thank first the Portuguese delegation for organizing this OSCE summer meeting. As we mark the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, a cornerstone of our collective commitment to peace, sovereignty, and the inviolability of borders, we reminded of the enduring relevance of his principles. Yet, those very principles have been under attack for far too long. Until Russia ends its unjustified and brutal aggression against Ukraine, a sovereign state, the OSCE, including this Parliamentary Assembly, must remain a forum where we hold Russia accountable for its blatant violations of international humanitarian and human rights law. We therefore welcome the principled and firm stance of the OSCPA President in the condemning Russia's war of aggression. Romania will continue to stand with Ukraine. Romania has been supporting Ukraine and the Ukrainian people affected by Russia's war of aggression by providing humanitarian aid, macro financial and military assistance, We have been providing shelter, food, medical assistance, access to education and labor market to all those fleeing the war and entering Romania, and we will continue to do so. Our support remains solid for as long as it takes. As we commemorate 5 decades since the signing of Helsinki Final Act, let us renew our dedication to the rule-based international order grounded in the UN Charter and the Helsinki Decalogue. These are not abstract ideals, they are the foundations of peace and security in our region. Now, more than ever, we must restore respect for these principles. This is not only our responsibility, it is our duty. We will support the supplementary item, draft resolution, sponsored by our neighbor and friend Nikita Porto from Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Mrs. Irina Gerashenko from Ukraine, and she will be followed by Mr. Maksat Kuliev from Turkmenistan. Ms. Gerashenko, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, dear colleagues. We thank Portugal for the warm welcome, and we thank all countries for the support of Ukraine and this decisive moment in history. We begin this session against the backdrop of tragic events in Ukraine. Every day, Russia kills dozens of our peoples, women, children, and destroys cities, schools, and kindergarten. Sadly, the number of civilian victims of Russian genocide against Ukraine continue to grow. In June alone, Russia's terrorist army launched more than 3,000 Shahed drones against Ukraine. Russia continues to use ballistic missiles to strike residential area hospitals. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia has launched over 28,000 kamikaze drones in Ukraine, and the number continues to grow. Amid this terror, we hear many declarations about a coalition of the willing stronger sanctions and holding Russians accountable. Yet, unfortunately, we do not see decisive action capable of stopping the violence. Leading the Western think tank warn that Russia is preparing for a long war against Ukraine, or even an expanded aggression against neighbor countries. We Ukrainians do not want to see Russian missiles and drones targeting NATO countries, but that means Russia must be stopped now, together. Investigating journalist has revealed that despite sanctions, Russia continues to push her new equipment for missiles production and effectively evaded export restrictions. Sanctions and real accountability for companies and countries that enable sanctions evasion are essential tools of pressure and the only plan to ending the war. And now, for us, it's very important to support the creation of the special tribunal for the crime of aggression. We urge all OSCE participation states to endure and join this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker on the list is Mr. Per Pons from Spain, who will be followed by Mr. Christophe Lacroix from Belgium. Mr. Pons, you have the floor.
Dear Mikita, thank you for the intervention and for the resolution. And I was thinking that exactly 3 years ago, just exactly 3 years ago and 2 days, we were together as OCPA Assembly with the former president, with Madame Margareta Zetterfeld in Bucha and in Kyiv, supporting your fight, which is also our fight. And I remember perfectly the time we spent there, and after 3 years, we are still here united, and I think this is the first point. And the second point is that we have a total support for the Ukrainian people and for Ukrainians. I would like to remember that on April 22, the 5th of April, President Zelensky spoke before the Spanish parliament. And he said, I quote, "It's April 2022, but it feels like April 1937, when the whole world saw what happened in your city in Guernica." Of course, he was talking about the Spanish tragedy of Guernica. So that's why I understand those words deeply that you said before. So that's why, as a parliamentarian and as a vice president, I have stood firmly in support of Ukraine's struggle for its sovereignty and for its freedom, and because your freedom is our freedom, and a better future is part of our future. But I think this morning we had in the Standing Committee a long debate on the future, and I think in this moment of uncertainty, of this moment of our region is very challenging and multilateralism is under strain, I think the most important outcome is that the Helsinki Final Act is more important than ever. 6, 7, 8 years ago, we would have not said the same thing. Today, the Helsinki Final Act is more important, and we have to work, as the Secretary General said, in the spirit of the Helsinki Final Act. So, in my perception, in the perception of the Spanish delegation, we're going to support this resolution, but also we have to work united and together, as we have done in the last 3 years, to support Ukraine and also to support peace and dialogue. Many thanks.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Mr. Christophe Lacroix from Belgium, and he will be followed by Mr. Artur Gerasimov from Ukraine. Mr. Lacroix, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je vais donc m'exprimer en français, si vous le voulez bien, ce qui permettra à chacun et chacune de s'équiper comme il le convient. Cette intervention pour vous dire que, très globalement, nous sommes évidemment derrière cette résolution et que nous déplorons tous et toutes au sein de la délégation belge l'agression infâme de la Russie contre la souveraineté de l'Ukraine, l'Ukraine qui se bat au jour le jour et qui défend également les valeurs européennes à travers la défense des valeurs des droits humains et des droits fondamentaux. Toutefois, nous voulons signaler 3 éléments qui pourraient poser problème, selon nous, dans la résolution. C'est le point qui condamne aujourd'hui le génocide perpétré par la Russie en Ukraine. Alors sans doute peut-on parler de risque de génocide, mais venir parler de génocide aussi ouvertement alors qu'aucun tribunal ne s'est positionné sur la question nous pose problème, et me pose problème personnellement, d'autant plus que lorsqu'il s'agit de la Palestine, on est beaucoup moins vocal sur le mot génocide, alors que, selon moi, Israël commet également un génocide en Palestine. Sur le point 21 de la résolution qui a trait au génocide historique commis par l'Empire russe et l'URSS, je trouve que, d'une part, ces génocides ne sont pas caractérisés comme tels par le droit. Deuxièmement, ce sont des massacres ignobles qui ont été commis, certains au XVIIIe et au XIXe siècle, et puis beaucoup plus récemment, notamment en ce qui concerne les Tchétchènes. Et donc je les condamne avec beaucoup de vigueur, mais il n'en reste pas moins vrai que dans le cadre d'une plateforme de dialogue qu'est l'OSCE, venir avec un récit qui est comme celui-là et qui concerne des crimes anciens perpétrés par d'autres régimes, dont certainement la Russie d'aujourd'hui est l'héritière, et sans jugement, ça pose également un problème. Et puis, nous avons un problème plus global sur les avoirs gelés pour réparer le crime d'agression de l'Ukraine. Nous sommes évidemment partisans d'un soutien à l'Ukraine, mais la solution ne viendra pas seulement de mon pays à travers le gel et la confiscation des avoirs, puisque ces avoirs sont placés dans la société Euroclear qui est située en Belgique, mais ce sera d'abord et avant tout une décision de l'Union européenne et donc un travail en commun qui doit être mené sur cette question. Et d'autre part, le tribunal de réparation de l'agression russe qui vient d'être institué à Strasbourg au Conseil de l'Europe la semaine dernière permettra peut-être, en temps opportun, d'avoir une décision en la matière. Donc ça nous semble prématuré d'évoquer cet aspect dans la résolution. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. And the last speaker on my list here is Mr. Artur Gerasimov from Ukraine. Artur, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I will start from the phrase I am telling you for the last my 10 years in this assembly. Thank you very much, this assembly. Thank you very much, every country. Thank you very much, every delegation who is supporting our people. Really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Please support this supplementary item. And not only support it, please show unity during this support. Because unity, this is exactly the thing Russia is afraid of. Russia is afraid of our unity. Russia is afraid of unity of European countries. Russia is afraid of unity when we are speaking about all civilized world. And the last but not least, supporting this draft resolution, you're not only supporting principles and values of the Helsinki Final Act, you are honored the common Ukrainians, those who are now on the front line, those who are now in the cities of Ukraine, towns, villages, are living under the shellings and heroically living, supporting the front. And you also honored Ukrainian children who are now under shellings. Despite shellings, they are studying in the shelters with the hope for peace and for the bright European future. Thank you very much one more time. Please vote unitedly and in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. The debate is now closed, and I would like to ask the author of this supplementary item, Mr. Poturayev, if you would like to respond.
I just would like to thank all parliamentarians who spoke in favor of this supplementary item, and join to my colleague Artur Gerasimov calling to vote in favor and show our unity. Thank you.
Now, dear colleagues, we will move to adoption of paragraphs and consideration of the single amendment submitted to the draft resolution. Copies of the amendment have been made available. When we get to the amendment, I will call the proposer of the amendment first, and then will call any opponent of the amendment. I will then ask the sponsor of the draft resolution, Vice President Poturayev, for his opinion. I ask speakers on the amendment to observe a time limit of only 1 minute. Following that, I shall put the amendment to the vote. We are also required to vote on every paragraph to which there are no amendments, as we have done previously to save time and to avoid many votes on items that have broad support. If no amendment has been tabled to a paragraph, and if nobody requests a vote on a paragraph, we can consider it adopted. Needless to say, any time a specific vote is requested, we will of course do so. So we will now take paragraphs from 1 to 8. Does anyone want a vote on any of these paragraphs? If not, paragraphs 1 to 8 are adopted. Then we go to paragraph number 9. Does anyone want to vote on any of these paragraphs? All right. There is someone wanting a vote, so we will take a vote on paragraph number 9. Will all those in favor of the paragraph please raise their voting cards? Will all those against paragraph number 9 please raise their voting cards?
That's clear. No abstentions. You could ask for
Any abstentions? Paragraph number 9 is agreed to. Then we go to paragraphs from 10 to number 20. Does anyone want to vote on any of these paragraphs? No, so paragraphs from 10 to 20 are agreed to. Then we go to paragraph number 21. Does anyone want to vote on any of these paragraphs? Yes. So we take a vote. Will all those in favor of this paragraph, number 21, please raise their voting cards? Thank you. And will all those against paragraph number 21 raise their voting cards? So paragraph number, any abstentions? Thank you. Paragraph number 21 is agreed to. We then go to paragraphs from 22 until 36. Does anyone want to vote on any of these paragraphs? No. So paragraphs from number 22 until 36 are agreed to. Then we go to amendment number 1. I call Mrs. Shalalambides from Cyprus to propose amendment number 1 to insert a new subparagraph after paragraph 37, subparagraph J. Ms. Shalalambides, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I have to say that this amendment is the result of the meeting I had in Prague during the GlobSec forum with the Deputy Minister of Finance of Ukraine. And the paragraph I want to insert is that to support humanitarian demining efforts in Ukraine and other OSCE participating states so as to promote civilian safety, resumption of safe agricultural use, and the restoration of access to education and health care in mine-contaminated areas, and to encourage OSCE engagement in international efforts for technical assistance, capacity building, and community-level awareness in demining operations in affected countries. This amendment seeks to ensure that our Assembly acknowledges and supports the urgent need for humanitarian demining in Ukraine and other mine-affected OSCE participating states. The presence of landmines and unexploded ordnance continues to endanger civilians, delay the return of displaced populations, and obstruct access to agricultural lands, schools, and healthcare facilities. By explicitly supporting demining efforts, we reaffirm our commitment to human security, post-conflict recovery, and the principles enshrined in the Helsinki Final Act. Furthermore, we encourage, through this amendment, the OSCE to strengthen its engagement, offering technical assistance, capacity building, and community-level awareness in coordination with international partners as a practical step towards peace building and regional stability. I urge you to support this amendment as a clear expression of solidarity with affected communities and a commitment to safe, sustainable, post-conflict recovery. Thank you.
Thank you. I now ask if anyone wishes to speak against amendment number 1. And now I would like to ask Vice President Poturayev's opinion of the amendment, please.
Dear colleagues, we think that it's a very important amendment, and I would like to thank Madam Karlambidis and colleagues from Canada, France, Portugal, Romania, Czechia, and Moldova and Cyprus for their proposal. So we call to support this amendment.
Thank you. So I shall now put amendment number 1 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise their voting cards? Thank you. And will all those against the amendment please their voting cards? Raise their voting cards. Any abstentions? Thank you. The amendment is adopted. We will now proceed to vote on paragraph number 37 as amended. Will all those in favor of the paragraph as a whole please raise their voting cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise their voting cards? Any abstentions? Thank you. Paragraph 37 is adopted. We then move forward to paragraphs from 38 to 41. Does anyone want to vote on any of these paragraphs from 38 to 41? In that case, paragraphs from 38 to 41 are agreed to. Thank you. We will now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended please raise their voting cards? Thank you. And would those against please raise their voting cards? Thank you. And any abstentions? Ladies and gentlemen, the draft resolution as amended is adopted. Thank you. We will now proceed with the consideration of the supplementary item on the Helsinki process 50 years on proposed by myself. As I will be speaking on the substance of this item, I will ask Vice President Luis Grasa to take the chair and preside over the remainder of this agenda item.
Thank you, Madam President. It's an honor to give you back the floor to you as the author of the item. We will then have a general debate on the item proposed, after which we will consider the 2 amendments that have been proposed. I give the floor to you, Madam President, to present the supplementary item.
Thank you, Vice President. Colleagues, as we mark the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, we are doing so at a time when European security faces serious challenges. Russia's war against Ukraine is the most significant threat to peace and stability in the OSCE region in decades. and continues to violate core principles of the Helsinki Final Act. I tabled this resolution because I think it is worthwhile for us to dedicate some time to consider the legacy of the process launched 50 years ago. The Final Act was signed during the Cold War, when tensions between the East and the West were high. Despite those divisions, 35 countries at that time agreed on a set of principles to guide relations between them and to serve as a basis for Europe's security architecture. The Final Act was signed with the purpose to prevent confrontation, to promote dialogue, and to enable trust between adversaries. It has had a major contribution in these fields. Today, however, European security and the OSCE as a whole are facing serious threats. We see a broader decline in multilateral cooperation and the rules-based order. The question then is, what is the OSCE's role in this? I think we can take inspiration from history. The Final Act was not signed by idealists trying to create a utopian world. So what were they trying to create? As I have already indicated, I think the name and history of the organization offer a hint: security. The Final Act may be the best example of recognition by statesmen. Yes, by the way, they were all men at that time. That security is not a zero-sum game. They showed us that security can be built together, even among adversaries. So while these may be hard times, I believe that this history, together with current geopolitical challenges, mean that the OSCE's role may be more important than ever. We are one of the last remaining platforms for engagement across geopolitical divides that has at its core a broad perspective on security. I believe that the theoretical potential for a revitalized OSCE is real, but the organization requires political attention and dedication to live up to this potential. As an assembly of parliamentarians interested and dedicated to the OSCE, I think it is our responsibility to push for this. That is what I hope to achieve with this resolution. That being said, I also recognize that the organization is not perfect, actually far from it. So it is also our responsibility to encourage change where necessary. The OSCE's consensus-based decision-making has been increasingly used to block important yet non-political decisions. We have seen that field operations have been forced to close, and the OSCE's ability to respond to crises has been constrained. The difficulties in reaching agreement on an OSCE budget are another example. The latest blockage of the budget has virtually nothing to do with finance, but has become a proxy fight for unrelated disputes with zero budgetary impact. But the actual consequences for people whose personal security is not being strengthened by the OSCE work is unfortunately real. Such actions are in many ways a return to pre-Helsinki Final Act thinking. It may mean that collectively our governments have forgotten the lessons of 50 years ago and returned to zero-sum thinking that your gain will necessarily mean my loss. Therefore, the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act presents us with an opportunity to push our governments to return the organization to its core principles and the underlying thinking. To put it clearly, respect for each other's sovereign equality and territorial integrity, refraining from the threat or use of force, and respect for human rights make each of us more secure, both you and your adversary. Looking ahead, the OSCE can play a crucial role in preparing for the day when multilateral diplomacy is once again strengthened. And let me state it again, this is not a sentimental approach for a global order. It represents hardcore security that is in each of our countries' own self-interest. I believe that clearly making this case may help to bring skeptics back on board, which would be to the benefit of all of us. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Madam President. I will now open the debate on this supplementary item, remembering each speaker you have 3 minutes. I call first Mr. John Lahart from Ireland, then next speaker will be Thomas Ports from France. Mr. John Lahart, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to support this draft resolution in the name of President Kauma. As she mentioned, when the Helsinki Final Acts were written, it was at a particular time. The authors, in using the word final acts, I'm very struck by the word final in that phrase. And if only, in hindsight, they were the final words, that they were the last words on the situation that faces our countries. We live in a world now where our rules-based order is being flouted and indeed openly challenged. And the principles set out in the Helsinki Final Acts are as relevant today as they were back in 1975. But we do see sovereign inequality in spite of the principles. We do see countries that don't refrain from either the use of violence and force or from the threat of use of that force. We do see that frontiers are not inviolable. And we do see that some countries, the integrity of their state is not respected. And these are just some of the principles outlined in the Helsinki Final Acts. The United Nations, a rules-based organization, is often ignored, debased, and humiliated. The European Union, a rules-based organization where some members choose an à la carte approach to their membership. But the greatest threat to the values that Europeans hold dear is indeed Russia. And European values are under threat. For small countries like Ireland, rules-based organizations are what guarantee our safety, security, and prosperity. And without values enforced by rules, in other words, when nations decide that some rules are not for them, then we move dangerously close to an environment where might is right, where the bully prevails, and where the liberal democratic values that we hold so dear are seriously threatened. But indeed, Mr. Chairman, the majority of countries follow these rules. So when we look at the Helsinki Final Acts, we appreciate with increasing alarm that they were not indeed final. We look at Ukraine, at Gaza, the occupied territories, Sudan, Yemen, Haiti, the list goes on. So now more than ever, we need to recommit ourselves to these principles to ensure that we can create order from growing chaos and security in a world full of growing insecurity. I'm happy to support the draft resolution.
Thank you, Mr. John Hart. I now call Mr. Thomas Ports from France, and the next speaker will be Mr. Barry Howard from Ireland. Mr. Thomas Ports, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, comme ça a été rappelé, alors que nous commémorons aujourd'hui les 50 ans de la commémoration de l'acte final d'Helsinki, qui actait un nouveau système européen de sécurité collective, la crise que nous vivons interroge toutes les certitudes et les doctrines passées. Un des rôles majeurs de l'OSCE est de prévenir et d'anticiper les conflits. Pourtant, aujourd'hui, notre organisation assiste en spectatrice au déclenchement de nouvelles guerres sur le continent et ailleurs. Si je partage le sens de cette résolution, notamment revitaliser l'OSCE, la rendre plus efficace, comme l'a évoqué la présidente, je m'interroge sur comment le faire appliquer concrètement. Aujourd'hui, la crédibilité de l'OSCE dans la construction et la garantie de la paix est sérieusement remise en cause au regard du deux poids deux mesures pratiqué. La condamnation de la Russie, comme le soutien à l'Ukraine, est légitime et nécessaire. Mais comment ici parler de paix, d'inviolabilité des frontières, de droit international et de droits humains quand l'OSCE n'a toujours pas condamné avec fermeté le génocide en cours à Gaza, la politique de colonisation en Cisjordanie et la famine utilisée comme arme de guerre par l'État d'Israël? Allons-nous regarder en silence un peuple se faire massacrer sans demander des sanctions contre le gouvernement de Benjamin Netanyahou? Depuis plusieurs semaines, les massacres de la faim se multiplient avec des Palestiniens assassinés de sang-froid par des militaires israéliens alors qu'ils attendaient de l'aide humanitaire. Si les mots sont nécessaires, ils ne valent rien sans choix politique concret. L'OSCE doit être en première ligne pour demander la suspension immédiate des accords d'association entre l'Union européenne et l'État d'Israël. Les volontés expansionnistes israéliennes en Syrie, au Liban et en Palestine sont une menace pour la sécurité européenne et mondiale. Si nous voulons que les accords d'Helsinki vivent, ils ne doivent pas dépendre des lieux des conflits et des auteurs des crimes. Comment parler de respect de droit international au moment où les États-Unis d'Amérique, en dehors de tout cadre légal, ont bombardé l'Iran, commentant des crimes de guerre? N'avons-nous rien retenu de la fameuse guerre préventive de 2003 en Irak, construite sur des mensonges? Qui peut croire que la paix se construit à coups de bombes et de violations de droit international? Aujourd'hui, des puissances sont à l'œuvre pour changer les règles du jeu et faire en sorte que la loi du plus fort régisse le monde. De Poutine à Trump, en passant par Netanyahou, au mouvement du M23 soutenu par le Rwanda dans l'est de la RDC, des criminels de guerre sont à l'offensive. Ne nous trompons pas de réponse. La guerre entraînera toujours la guerre. Le seul chemin rationnel est celui de la paix, et il porte un nom clair, celui de la désescalade. Notre déclaration, je crois, de manière claire, condamner les crimes commis par la Russie, mais aussi ceux commis par l'État d'Israël aujourd'hui contre le peuple palestinien, le peuple libanais, le peuple syrien, le peuple yéménite, le peuple iranien et les États-Unis d'Amérique doivent être aussi condamnés pour les bombardements sur l'Iran.
Merci, Monsieur Thomas Porte. I will now give the floor to Mr. Barry Ward from Ireland, and the next speaker will be Mr. Boris Dietrich from Netherlands. Mr. Barry Ward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I am also happy to support this draft amendment and SI. I think it's very important at this historical juncture to mark the passing of such an important stage in the history of our continent and our countries, and an acknowledgement by those countries who came together in Helsinki 50 years ago at a time when there was very heightened tensions between many of them, that they would acknowledge those truths and those principles that we need to guide us in everything we do. I'm younger than the Helsinki Final Acts, but I also recognize that during its lifetime, things have become better for the most part. There have been huge improvements. There have been huge steps forward in the areas of those rights that are set down in the guiding principles. But I also recognize that in many areas they have disimproved, particularly in recent years. And so as we look at those principles now, we must acknowledge that they are probably more important today than they have possibly been since they were first written down 50 years ago. And in looking at that, we must ask ourselves, in respect of each of our countries, if we genuinely do accept these guiding principles as important factors that we take into account in deciding what we do as national governments and as nations. And I'm afraid that unfortunately, sometimes national interests, or indeed the interests of national governments, trump these principles. And we have seen in recent times many examples of where that has occurred, very regrettably so. And my colleague outlined a number of international examples of where that has happened outside the OSCE, but it has happened within the OSCE as well, and not just from external actors. In that regard, I particularly want to welcome the release this month of Sergei Tikhanovsky, a prisoner of politics in Belarus. I welcome his release as a step forward, and I acknowledge that within that instance, there are examples of national governments who have not held these principles as guiding principles. I say that conscious that none of us is perfect. No country does the right thing every time. But if we are to rely on an international rules-based order, then we must strive to constantly follow the guiding principles set down in Helsinki 50 years ago. When we fail to do that, we fail the values of the people, including the leader of my party at that time, Liam Cosgrave, who signed for Ireland. We failed at the values that they put together at a very difficult time, and we failed the citizens whom we represent across the nations of the OSCE. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barry Ward. I will now give the floor to Mr. Boris Dietrich from Netherlands, and the next speaker will be Sean Crown, also from Ireland. Mr. Boris Dietrich, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in support of this supplementary item. The OSCE calls on states to respect human rights and security for all people according to the Helsinki principles of 50 years ago. And that's, of course, very important and relevant, especially now that we see that Russia is violating all rules in its war against Ukraine. Last week, President Zelensky addressed the Dutch Parliament in The Hague during the NATO conference. And I was impressed by the tenacity and the integrity of the president and, of course, also of the Ukrainian people. And we stand by them in their fight for freedom against the Russian aggressor. And we were reminded of the importance of the Helsinki principles as laid out in this draft resolution as well. I'd like to focus on one specific topic. I think it's of the utmost importance that the OSCE as organization will continue to work on the immediate and unconditional release of the 3 OSCE officials, and I will name them Mr. Golda, Mr. Petrov, and Mr. Shabanov, who were taken prisoner by Russia from Ukraine. They received long prison sentences and are still held in detention in Russia. And my questions are actually, what is the latest news? We were, and I look at you, Vice President, we were in Kiev in February and we spoke to their family members and we promised to give them the news of what is going on. When will they be released? That's my question. And to conclude, I would like to say that I'm in support of this draft resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Boris Dietrich. I'll now give the floor to Mr. Sean Crowley from Ireland, and it's our last speaker. Mr. Sean Crowley, you have the floor.
Madam President, the war in Gaza, which has seen devastating violence and profound human suffering leading to genocide and ethnic cleansing, underscores a broader crisis in international diplomacy and the erosion of the guiding principles enshrined in the Helsinki Final Act. That was a landmark agreement designed to promote peace, security and cooperation in Europe and beyond. We have witnessed the death of over 100,000 Palestinians within sight of European borders, and we have done nothing. The international community's failure to enforce the provisions of the Helsinki Final Act in the case of Gaza reveals a disturbing trend. States that once championed the Helsinki principles now often ignore them in pursuit of their own selfish interests. Fewer and fewer countries are participating in conflict resolution and peacekeeping in an increasingly fractious and dangerous world. The international community seems increasingly unwilling or unable to uphold the core Helsinki principles of respect for human rights and the peaceful resolution of disputes. The ongoing war in Gaza, marked by indiscriminate artillery and airstrikes, widespread displacement and the use of hunger as a weapon, is a glaring violation of these principles. The breakdown of diplomatic negotiations and the failure to resolve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in a peaceful manner reflects a collapse in the kind of multilateral cooperation that Helsinki aimed to foster. So as long as there are acceptable exceptions to the rule of international law, as long as those selfish interests come first, that spirit of cooperation will continue to diminish. The failure to adhere to the Helsinki emphasis on the right of peoples to self-determination is particularly poignant in the context of Gaza. Palestinians live under military occupation and have long struggled to exercise their right to self-determination or have any meaningful autonomy or control of their own land and destiny, a principle that was meant to be a cornerstone of international law and diplomacy. So, colleagues, the inability to provide adequate humanitarian assistance in Gaza not only violates the Helsinki principles, but also demonstrate a broader international reluctance to uphold the fundamental humanitarian obligations that should guide foreign policy decisions. The war in Gaza serves as a stark reminder that the world has drifted away from the ideals of the Helsinki Final Act. The genocide and the horror that we see playing out on the nightly news is an urgent call for all nations to return to these guiding principles. If the world is to find a way to end the violence and build a more just and peaceful future. The ideals of the Helsinki Final Act remain a powerful framework for achieving this, but they can only be realised if we recognise collectively just how far we have strayed from them.
Thank you, Mr. Sinkron. The debate is now closed, and Madam President, do you wish to respond?
Mr. Vice President, I would like to thank all the speakers as well as all Assembly members for your wide support for this supplementary item, which I consider very important because it reminds us of the roots of this organization and also gives us reason and motivation to continue our important work in favor of peace and security in the OSCE area also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. We will now move to adoption of paragraphs and consideration of the two amendments submitted to the draft resolution. Copies of the amendments have been made available. I will call the proposer of the amendment first, and then will call any opponent of the amendment. I will then ask the sponsor of the draft resolution, Madam President Pia Kauma, for her opinion. I ask speakers to observe a time limit, 1 minute. Following that, I shall put the amendment to the vote. As we have done previously, if no amendment has been tabled to a paragraph, and if nobody requests a vote on a paragraph, we can consider it adopted. Needless to say, anytime a specific vote is requested, we will do so. I will now take paragraph 1 to 4 together. Does anyone want a vote of any of these paragraphs? With no requests for a vote, paragraph 1, we shall vote here. No, paragraph 1 to 4 are agreed. I call, for Amendment 1, I call Dr. Eddie Fry from Canada to propose Amendment 1 to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 4. Dr. Eddie Fry.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, I'm pleased to introduce this amendment on behalf of Senator Wicker, who is unable to be here today. This amendment underscores the importance of transatlantic partnerships and cooperation and reaffirms the Helsinki's Final Act as a cornerstone of the OSCE security framework. Adopted in 1975, the Helsinki Final Act established these principles and commitments to govern the behavior of states and to uphold fundamental rights and freedoms in the region. 50 years after its adoption, the promise of Helsinki is under threat. With the illegal and brutal war of aggression against Ukraine, including its utter contempt of Ukraine's sovereignty, Russia has violated international law, including its commitments under the Helsinki Final Act. And during this period of regional conflict and instability, it is critical that the transatlantic security alliance remains strong and united. Now, more than ever, we must reaffirm the commitment to our collective security. I want to thank President Kauma for proposing this SI, and I urge you to support this amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Eddie Fry. Does anyone wish to speak against the Amendment 1? There's no one. So what is Madam President Kauma's opinion of the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I am in favor of the amendment number 1 because I think it complements the supplementary item very well by reminding us all about the importance of transatlantic partnerships.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. We should now put Amendment 1 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting cards? It's a beautiful view from here. All those against, please raise your voting cards. Are there any abstentions? Amendment 1 is adopted. Thank you. We'll now take paragraph 5 to 7 together. Does anyone want a vote of any of these paragraphs? With no request for a vote, paragraphs 5 to 7 are agreed. I call now Mr. Altinok from Turkey to propose Amendment 2 to delete paragraph 8. Mr. Altinok, you have the floor.
Sayın Başkan, değerli meslektaşlarım, bu değişiklik önerisiyle karar alma süreçlerine konsensüs ilkesinin sınırlandırılmasına yönelik çağrı yapan paragrafın metinden çıkarılmasını talep ediyoruz. AGİT'in ana ruhu ve temel dayanaklarından biri olan konsensüs ilkesi, tüm katılımcı devletlerin eşit söz hakkına sahip olmasını ve kararların ortak uzlaşıyla alınmasını garanti altına almaktadır. Bu ilkenin zayıflatılması, örgütün meşruiyetine ve bütünlüğüne zarar verebilir. AGİT'in istişare ve diplomasi ruhunu ortadan kaldırabilir. Bu nedenle söz konusu paragrafın silinmesini öneriyoruz. Desteklerinizi bekliyoruz. Teşekkür ederim.
Thank you, Mr. Altinok. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 2? No, so I will ask Madam President Piacalma opinion of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Like I pointed out in my intervention, decision-making based on consensus has been used in our organization to block yet important but non-political decisions like budget. However, since decision-making based on consensus goes to the very core of our organization and our decision-making, I would like to hear your opinion, dear colleagues. And therefore, I would like to suggest the amendment number 2 to vote, and I will make my own opinion after hearing your opinion.
Thank you, Madam President. So we'll vote. I shall now put Amendment 2 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting cards? Just a minute. Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting cards? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 2 is defeated. We will now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. Will those in favor of adopting the draft resolution please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Will those against please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Are there any abstentions? The draft resolution as amended is adopted. Thank you, Madam President. And please take your place, because you need you here.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Please bear with me a little bit longer, because we will now proceed with the consideration of the supplementary item on strengthening a positive agenda for cooperation in the Western Balkans, proposed by Kyriakos Hadiani from Cyprus. I now give the floor to Kyriakos Hadiani to present this supplementary item. Kyriakos, you have the floor.
Madam President, dear colleagues, it is with great honor that I submit before the plenary session of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly the supplementary item entitled Strengthening the Positive Agenda for Cooperation in the Western Balkans. This initiative reflects my deep conviction that peace, security and prosperity throughout the OSCE region are deeply connected to the stability and cohesion of the Western Balkans, a region of great geopolitical importance and a complex historical legacy. Despite the progress made in recent decades, the region continued to face numerous challenges related to unresolved bilateral disputes, lack of trust, political instability, and democratic challenges. At the same time, there has been increased activity by external actors seeking to strengthen their influence through economic pressure, misinformation, and political polarization. This supplementary item puts forward a constructive, forward-looking, and cohesive cooperation agenda, focusing on practical and geopolitical steps to promote regional reconciliation, social cohesion, and the European path of the Western Balkan countries. Among other points, the supplementary item encourages interparliamentary dialogue and the use of parliamentary diplomacy as a tool for peace, acknowledges the vital role of civil society, youth, and women in sustaining peace and building trust, supports reforms in key areas such as the judiciary, transparency, digital transformation, and green development, reaffirms the commitment to the rule of law, the protection of human and minority rights, the media freedom, and finally, calls on the EU and the OSCE to strengthen their support for the region through targeted technical assistance and policy engagement. In short, the supplementary item seeks to contribute to strengthening a positive, inclusive, and future-oriented agenda on cooperation with the aim of restoring trust, promoting reconciliation, and enhancing long-term stability across the region, across the Balkan countries. What I would like to emphasize, especially for those who may not be familiar with the philosophy and objectives of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly Interparliamentary Forum on Southeast Europe, is that this initiative is highly significant and has already had a very positive impact on participants. We are in the right direction, actively discussing issues of common interest that affect the entire region of Western Balkans, and we are working together to find solutions across a broad spectrum of topics with a primary focus on fostering cooperation among the countries of Southeast Europe. Cooperation which, in my view, has so much to offer to a region that has long suffered from instability. It is precisely for this reason that the present resolution was prepared to promote, first and foremost, regional cooperation. We initiate together measures which are building trust. Trust between parliaments, societies, and between the people. Trust through dialogue. Cooperation based on trust. Peace needs trust and cooperation. I therefore call on the members of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly to support this supplementary item as an expression of the OSCE commitments to peace, dialogue, and democratic progress in the Western Balkans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will now open a debate on this supplementary item, and I have two names on the list. First speaker will be Ms. Liliana Tanguy from France, and she will be followed by Mr. Albin Muslik from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Ms. Tanguy, you have the floor.
Merci Madame la Présidente, je m'exprimerai en français. Chers collègues, le projet de résolution proposé par le représentant spécial pour l'Europe du Sud-Est appelle au renforcement de la coopération dans les Balkans occidentaux en mettant l'accent sur la stabilité, la sécurité et la paix dans la région, comme cela vient d'être dit. Cette résolution reconnaît l'importance stratégique des Balkans occidentaux pour l'Europe et souligne la nécessité de la réconciliation, de la coopération régionale et des bonnes relations de voisinage. La résolution exprime sa préoccupation face à l'instabilité politique et aux conflits non résolus et insiste sur le dialogue et la diplomatie parlementaire pour favoriser un futur commun basé sur la paix et la prospérité. Elle souligne également l'importance de l'égalité des genres, de l'autonomisation des jeunes et de la liberté des médias comme piliers d'une société démocratique résiliente. Je souscris pleinement aux préconisations formulées pour un engagement collectif en faveur de la réconciliation et de la coopération mutuelle conformément à l'acte final d'Helsinki, ainsi que pour la reconnaissance de la perspective européenne des Balkans occidentaux comme un moteur clé des réformes démocratiques et de la croissance économique dans une démarche de développement durable. Cela suppose que ces États soient en capacité d'assurer l'indépendance judiciaire et lutter contre la corruption par des réformes législatives ambitieuses et une coopération transfrontalière accrue. En tant que vice-présidente de la sous-commission sur les Balkans occidentaux de la Commission des questions politiques de l'Assemblée parlementaire du Conseil de l'Europe, je soutiens cette proposition de résolution et souhaite souligner à nouveau que la liberté des médias et la lutte contre la désinformation sont essentielles au renforcement de la démocratie et des valeurs fondamentales européennes dans cette région, dont dépendent également la sécurité, la stabilité et l'unité de l'Europe tout entière. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Mr. Albin Muslik from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mr. Muslik, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. It's a great honor to be here today. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our hosts for their warm and gracious welcome. In these challenging times, it's more important than ever to promote peace and cooperation among nations. Within this context, I would like to underscore the importance of the resolution of cooperation in the Western Balkans, particularly the sections addressing the independence of the judiciary and the fight against corruption through legislative reforms and cross-border collaboration. This is of vital significance for the Western Balkans as a region and especially for the Bosnia and Herzegovina. As you know, Bosnia and Herzegovina remains firmly committed to pursuing membership in the European Union. However, the country continues to face numerous obstacles and challenges along this path. One such challenge is the frequent obstructions in the work of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Bosnia and Herzegovina, which directly impedes the legislative processes required for aligning with European standards. Ultimately, the core principle of any democratic society is the rule of law and the equal application of justice to all, without exceptions. I firmly believe that the resolution of cooperation in the Western Balkan will contribute meaningfully to the development of democratic relations and regional cooperation. Most importantly, it will help reinforce the rule of law across Western Balkans, an issue of critical importance for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to ask Mr. Hadiani, do you wish to respond?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, all of you, for your support, and I think that it was enough through the speeches.
All right, we will now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution please raise their voting cards? Thank you. And would those against please raise their voting cards? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. The draft resolution is adopted. Now, dear colleagues, it's time to move on our agenda to reports on election observation activities. We have had 2 election observation missions since we last met in Vienna in February. We observed the parliamentary elections in Albania in May, as well as both rounds of the presidential election in Romania in May. I will first invite Farah Karimi from the Netherlands, who served as special coordinator of the short-term OSCE observer mission to the elections in Albania, to please present the findings from this observer mission. Ms. Karimi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I am pleased to present to you a report on our Assembly's election observation mission to the 11 May parliamentary elections in Albania, which I had the honor to lead as a special coordinator appointed by the OSCE chairperson in office. Let me first express my gratitude to the government of the Republic of Albania for the invitation to observe its electoral process in accordance with its OSCE commitments. I would also like to thank the very qualified and professional team of ODIHR observers led by Ambassador Lamberto Zanier, as well as my colleagues from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe and the European Parliament, with whom we closely cooperated throughout the mission. A special word of thanks goes to my colleague from Assembly, Bjorn Söder, who led the OSCE PA delegation, for excellent and fruitful cooperation. The International Election Observation Mission to the Albania parliamentary election comprised a total of 365 observers from 47 countries, including 238 experts and long-term observers deployed by ODIHR, 97 parliamentarians and staff from the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, 22 representatives from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and 12 from the European Parliament. I would particularly like to commend our Assembly's strong interest in this mission, as we have deployed 70 members of Parliament from a total of 31 OSCE countries, and our observation efforts on election day span several cities, including Tirana, Berat, Duras, Skoder, and Saranda. This high interest displayed by members of Parliament from so many countries in these elections is a manifestation of how much we care for Albania, for its people, and for its future. Our statement of preliminary findings and conclusions is available on our website for your reference. In these parliamentary elections, the people of Albania showed deep democratic commitment. In a highly polarized and sometimes difficult environment, they participated and they made their voices heard. Approximately 3.7 million voters were registered for Albania's 2025 elections. According to the 2023 census, the resident population in Albania is about 2.4 million. Nearly 250,000 voters registered to vote from abroad, and around 192,000 votes were received from abroad via DHL. The overall voter turnout, including voters from abroad, was reported at 42.21%. We found that the 2025 parliamentary elections in Albania were competitive and professionally conducted. Candidates were generally able to campaign freely. However, they did not enjoy a level playing field, and some reported facing intimidation. The electoral administration managed the process in an inclusive and transparent manner. The out-of-country voting, introduced for the first time for these elections, was well managed, despite the late political agreement and adoption of this measure and some organizational issues. Regarding the campaign, it was noted that the ruling party benefited from widespread use of administrative resources during the campaign, creating an undue advantage of incumbency. There were also numerous allegations of pressure on voters, especially public employees. The active use of online social networks by the contestants amplified the strong confrontational discourse, and no authority was designated to detect harmful manipulative content. We noted as a welcome development a new coordination mechanism among institutions to investigate and prosecute electoral crimes, and encouraged a follow-through to address persistent concerns of electoral malpractices. Election day was generally calm and well organized, but there was a frequent lack of adherence to procedures, and it was marked by a number of incidents of intimidation and inducement of voters and some procedural and transparency shortcomings in the vote count. Our mission noted that women's participation has grown in recent years, yet their advancement remains constrained by entrenched structural barriers, particularly weak internal party democracy and limited access to funding. In addition to the preliminary statement, which is available on our website, the ODIHR will also publish a final report, which I encourage you to read as well. The report will include a number of recommendations to address the shortcomings observed, which we strongly recommend the authorities to implement and offer our assemblies assistance in this process. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Farah Karimi. Are there any comments to Ms. Karimi on the observer mission in Albania? I have one name on the list, Mr. Fatmir Mediu from Albania. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to thank Ms. Karimi and also Bjorn and the other colleagues from OSCE that participated in observation mission in Albania. And we'll start with the point that Secretary General Guterres mentioned about our work and complimented us that we observe elections to make them more free. So when I see the report, it's alarming. It's not just more free, but it's getting from the bad to the worst in elections in Albania. And just taking some points that Ms. Karimi mentioned here, let me just go a little bit more specific. So the government distributed €100 bonus of the Prime Minister to close to 800,000 pensioners a month before the elections, which is a clear vote buying. Also, he pardoned, the fines from 2015 to 2025, only 2 days before the elections, around $200 million. $500 million were given to procurement in violation of the law. Also, the separation of the party and the state, because we used to leave one party, one state during the communist time, is now becoming a big problem because there's no separation. The civil administration now is one together with the socialist government working as an electoral machine in favor of the government and the ruling party. one of the biggest problems ever in Albania that should be considered very carefully is the collusion of the state capture with the organized crime and money laundering. And we have cases, obvious cases in Albania, that people that had no idea nobody knows them who they are, were elected with the support of organized crime, and are clear evidence about that. They got more votes than people that really were involved in politics for a long time. Very distinguished people, you know, from the socialist side, but they had the support of organized crime. I'll mention just one example. A young lady, 25 years old, in a prison with 112 prisoners voting, she got 92 votes. So that's a clear example how the effect of organized crime is also in some other areas as well. But another big problem in Albania, because everybody speaks about the independent judiciary and we are all for independence of judiciary, but using the judiciary as a political weapon against the opposition, arresting, proceeding in the court, and trying, you know, to put all the opposition leaders in the court before the election doesn't tell me that Albania is different from Georgia. And we are talking here about a NATO country. We're talking about EU prospective country. And it doesn't seem that, you know, we meet even NATO standards or even EU prospective standards. And Ms. Karimi mentioned something about the ladies as well, the women participation. A colleague of mine went with her daughter to observe the elections, at the day of the elections. And you know what the people of organized crime that were controlling that area and the ballot station there told her? Your daughter looks beautiful, we can use her. So when they do that to a member of parliament, can you believe what they can do to normal citizens? So let's open our eyes and let's speak clearly, because I don't want that some people read half of the sentence and the others read half of the sentence. Some read left to the right like Latins do, and some, you know, from the right to the left like, you know, Arabs do. Let's say the truth as it is. These elections were a farce. And we are going to face a very critical situation in Albania because we don't have any longer parliamentary system. We have an autocracy. An autocracy never develops free and a fair election. Thank you.
Thank you for your very valuable contribution. We will now move on to the second observation mission we had, which was to the repeat presidential election in Romania. I invite Lucy Potuchkova from Czech Republic to please present the conclusions from the mission to Romania. Ms. Potuchkova, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, it is an honor to present this report following my role as a special coordinator and head of the OSCE Limited Election Observation Mission to the repeat 25 presidential election in Romania. Let me begin by thanking my fellow Bureau members who joined me on this mission. Your professionalism and spirit of cooperation were invaluable and greatly appreciated. As this was a limited mission, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly was represented by 3 Bureau members from 3 countries in the first round and 4 members from 4 countries in the second round. We deployed in and around Bucharest for both rounds of election day. Our work was closely coordinated with OSCE ODIHR, forming a joint observation effort of 44 observers from 19 countries, including 37 ODIHR experts and long-term observers. Our preliminary findings and conclusions for both rounds are available online. Overall, we observed that the election was efficiently administered and fundamental freedoms of assembly and association were respected. Voters had a genuine choice among political alternatives. That said, the campaign period raised concerns. Oversight of key aspects was insufficient, and we noted the widespread use of inauthentic behavior online. While efforts by the authorities to regulate the digital space were notable and have increased, the approach remained fragmented, with limited transparency and coordination across institutions. This undermined public trust and discouraged civic engagement. We also observed that the legal framework does offer a foundation for democratic elections, but recent changes fell short of addressing deeper concerns. Candidate eligibility rules based on core decisions rather than clear legal provisions also hindered inclusivity. Transparency in the election administration decision-making was limited. Media coverage presented a mixed picture. While diverse, many outlets reflected political affiliations. The public broadcaster did provide balanced reporting, but overall, voters' access to impartial information was constrained. On election day itself, our teams observed an orderly and well-managed process. In the second round, we again found that the technical preparations were carried out efficiently, but transparency remained a concern. One area of ambiguity was the unregulated period between the first round and the start of the official second round campaign. This created uncertainty around permissible political activity, campaign finance, and media rules. Despite the highly polarized environment and frequent use of inflammatory rhetoric, the election saw record turnout, particularly among the diaspora, and was conducted peacefully. We commend the Romanian people for their strong democratic participation. Online campaigning remained dominant in the second round, often characterized by polarizing messages and personal attacks. Disinformation about the process itself prompted official responses, reflecting the urgency of stronger oversight in this area. While we welcome the recent steps taken by authorities to safeguard electoral integrity, especially in the digital sphere, these elections have shown that further work is needed. The current framework requires improvement to ensure transparency, inclusivity, and public trust, in line with the OSCE commitments and international standards. We greatly appreciate the Romanian authorities' openness to their recommendations and trust that our observations will support further progress. I also hope that the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly remains actively engaged with our Romanian colleagues, offering continuing support and partnership as they work to address current electoral challenges. Finally, let me add that although this election observation mission was limited, I consider it a highly valuable insight into Romanian democracy. Despite organization's limited budget, I firmly believe it is extremely important to continue organizing such missions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I now look at the list of speakers to this item, and there are two names. First of all, Mr. Julian Lorenz from Romania, who will be followed by Juan Pere Pons from Spain. And there is also a third name, Mr. Paul Bartolome Areni from Andorra. So, Mr. Julian Lorenz from Romania, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam President. Thank you to the Portuguese team for organizing this important event. The elections are over in Romania, and we are very happy that a pro-European and pro-NATO candidate won the election. I don't want to hide that. This is very important for the European Union. I had only been into OSCPA for 2 weeks when I decided to write to Madam President Pia Kauma and Roberto Montella and ask for an extra observation mission from OSCPA. So I want to thank you, Madam President, for being open and very responsive, monitoring the election in our country. I want to say thank you to Madam Potuchikova and for all the work. And this report said that we had a lot of cases of disinformation and inauthentic online behavior affecting public trust in the electoral process. And I fully agree, because today, 50 years later, this is a new danger, and this is the new and dangerous reality that we are facing. We are confronted with hybrid warfare in which online manipulation, distortion of the truth, undermining of trust in institutions, and deep societal polarization have become the invisible weapons of this war. In this context, I think a paradigm shift is needed, starting with how we approach elections. And the OSCE PA must be at the forefront of this change. Currently, OSCE PA election observation mission focus primarily on election day and traditional campaign activities. But today, elections are being undermined through algorithms, fake accounts, and organized troll networks. So traditional election observation missions are no longer sufficient. Let's take a look not only in Romania, let's take a look at Republic of Moldova. During the October 2024 EU's referendum, tens of millions of euros were funneled into obscure campaigns conducted on Telegram, a flood of messages aimed to discredit the vote and the government, as well as undermine confidence in the European Union. Moreover, one of the main pro-Russian political actors, Ilan Shor, spent a lot of money to buy voters. According to Moldovan police, he used over 37 million euros to corrupt voters. Then my country followed. On platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, a well-organized network of trolls, fake channels, and coordinated accounts spread a lot of messages of extremist and pro-Russian candidates, reaching even the poorest communities. TikTok confirmed in a public report that we had more than 27,000 fake accounts were used to promote the extremist candidates. Thus, Romania became the target of an unprecedented hybrid attack, and of course, everybody knows who orchestrated it. It was Russia. This interference led to annulment of the 2024 presidential election. It was extremely difficult to the pro-European and pro-NATO candidate, Nicu Șordan, to win under such circumstances, yet his victory was crucial for democracy and for the security of the European Union. And as I said, it's not just about Moldova or Romania. These pro-Russian influence networks operate freely across Central and Eastern Europe. They use Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Telegram, fake channels, and carefully crafted narratives to undermine trust in democracy, trust in the EU, trust in NATO. They are succeeding and they are not going to stop here. They will keep expanding their influence into Western Europe. This is the reason that I think is essential for the OSCE to adapt its election monitoring methodology. Having observers at polling stations is not longer enough. We need clear monitoring of online activities, effective mechanisms to combat manipulation and close cooperation with digital platforms. The European Union needs fair, transparent election protected, but not only for Russia, but also for other interests. We need the democracy does not defend itself. It needs strong institutions, international cooperation, and unwavering support from all of us. This is where the OSCE must step in. Let us remember that the OSCE was created to protect democracy. Today, on the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, this role is more important than ever. But to succeed, we must adapt. We must reinvent ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to remind everyone that we are going to have a side event related to digitalization of election campaigns on Wednesday, the 2nd of July at 1:30.
I will be there.
So we will be continuing this discussion there. And the next speaker will be Juan Pere Pons from Spain, and he will be followed by Paul Bartolomé Areni from Andorra. There you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and I'm very happy to speak after my colleague from Romania because I wanted to say very short things, but I think it links to what he said. The first point is it's key what we saw this year, that we had a long-term, let's say, or a classic observation in Albania, thanks to the thanks to the observers and to the head of missions, and also this limited observation. This morning in the standing committee, it was said that the growth for the next year is 0 in terms of budget. So we have to learn how to work in both ways, in the, let's say, in the classic view and in the limited view. So I think this is something that we all have to share, that with 0 growth, we'll have to work in both directions. The second point is, yes, this is where we can make a difference. This is where we can make a difference with these electoral observations. I would like to remind you, as a head of the US delegation, that we are there to observe, not to judge, not to lecture. So it's important to remember and to remind us. And then the last thing, which my colleague from Romania underscored, is that we have a lot of information regarding the new trends in elections, and we have to be able to connect these different elections to really provide and produce an outcome of what is going on in terms of fake, in terms of disinformation, in terms of the new social network, etc. So we have to work on that, because there is where we have a lot of information and where we can make a difference. So thank you to the both observations, and also I think it's very important to learn how we're going to work in these limited situations where we won't have a total budget to go, let's say, to a classic observation. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And the next, and at the same time last speaker on my list here is Mr. Paul Bartolomé Areni from Andorra. Mr. Areni, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. My remarks do not refer directly to the case of Romania, but to the importance of reinforcing the OCPA task in the field of election observation. So I therefore underline what has been previously said by my colleagues from Spain and Romania. Dear colleagues, rising geopolitical tensions are both endangering the stability of our global security architecture and eroding the main foundations of democracy. And this context is particularly harmful for organizations such as ours, which dedicate to the promotion of democracy and security through international dialogue. Today, dear colleagues, we are witnessing the resurgence of fragmentation and global division. From Ukraine to Gaza, from Iran to Taiwan, new geopolitical stress is bringing the world at the edge of a new humanitarian collapse. In light of the risk that a global crack would mean for our societies, we, the parliamentarians, have the duty to chart a different course for mankind, one that is rooted in the values of the rule of law and electoral integrity. In this regard, the OCPA has deployed thousands of parliamentarians to observe more than 200 elections across more than 30 countries since the first election observation mission in Russia back in 1993. Accordingly, there is no hesitation in recognizing that that effort reinforces the OCPA reputation as a global leader in the field of democracy. But as always, there is a long way to go. That is to say, our reports can be more comprehensive, the visibility of our missions can be enhanced, and the coordination with other international actors, such as the Council of Europe, can be stimulated. At a time of rising authoritarianism and democratic backsliding, the election observation missions have emerged as one of our most powerful tools. Therefore, by enhancing our election observation task force, I believe that we can also strengthen these organizations' contribution to global peace and global security. I thank you.
Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our business for today. Tomorrow will be a day for committee meetings, and we will start at 9 o'clock in the morning. This evening, we will be hosted by the mayor of Vila Nova de Gaia, and the buses will be leaving from downstairs in a moment. Please be sure to remove all of your belongings, as the room will be slightly rearranged before our meetings tomorrow. Thank you everyone for today, and see you in a short while. Thank you.